Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session today. How to eliminate imposter syndrome for good. Imposter syndrome has been a topic so interesting. I'm closing the music. It has come up so much in my work. So many of you have reached out talking about how you feel a lot of the times the success not deserved or insecurity. And I'm bringing today a dear colleague, Tara Halliday. She's an expert on imposter syndrome. She's written books about it. She has coaching and therapeutic background, and that's what she does. And I was really impressed because initially I saw Tara's work and she was saying, I have a program based on neuroscience. It works. It eliminates imposter syndrome. And I was really impressed by that. So I have referred a lot of my clients her way. But when she asked me to read the draft of her book, and read her content, and I saw how she was working on that and how she was working about unconditional worthiness, I felt even more aligned with her work. So it's with great pleasure that I'm bringing today to you, Tara Halliday. Let me bring her on. Hello, Tara.
Hello, Caterina. Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, and welcome.
Thank you.
So I'll dive right in as people are joining us. Would you
Sure.
like to talk us? I'll ask you first. What made you interested to develop this expertise on imposter syndrome? What was it about imposter syndrome that you said, yes, that's the thing?
Well, it's interesting. It's probably not the way that you might think of it. So,
Okay.
22 years ago, I started my training as a holistic therapist and a high performance coach.
Yep.
And I work through helping people in all sorts of struggles and stresses in their lives and get over it. But I had a few clients that kept coming back, and that wasn't the point. The point was I was supposed to empower them and they'd go on. So the few that kept coming back, I needed to dig in. Why? Why wasn't what I was doing effective enough for them? And that led me to some coaching work, very deep coaching work around unconditional worth, or rather conditional worth, which is the belief that my worth depends on what I do. And so I'd worked for a few years. I trained in this. I worked for a few years in this area. And a client of mine mentioned imposter syndrome. And I'd never heard of it at the time. So I looked into it. And it was so obvious to me that imposter syndrome was a result of this belief that your worth is conditional. And I even checked with my mentor, and he said, "Oh yes, it's just another one." But he wasn't really focused on it. And I thought, no, this is a big deal. This is affecting people who are successful, and it's putting barriers in their way. It's affecting their performance. It causes people to burn out, get exhausted, leave their careers. So that's when I started doing research into it, and basically went from there.
I love that. Because I hear people, there's a lot of debate about, is it imposter syndrome a thing? Is it a symptom? Is it natural self-doubt? But
Mm.
your underpinning about, is my worth conditional? I find it so often in my work as a coach. And this is what really resonated with me in your work. Like you said, this is the root. And this
Yeah.
is uh, what we need to work on. And it's funny because we had booked this for quite a while, this session,
Yeah.
and I'm working on my TEDx script. And
Oh,
it started, yes,
yeah.
yes. I have a TEDx talk on 8th of October, and
Beautiful.
I've changed the script quite a lot, but this is what has come up with me in the last year as well, because, when you get the TEDx opportunities, what's the one idea? And a lot of the work I do on vision and goals, and it came back to the worth and whether it's conditional and unconditional, because a lot of the
Mm.
goals, we don't even want them. We just set them there because we think, oh, if I achieve this, then I have worth, right? Which
Yes.
is not the right way to go about goals and vision. So I'm thinking, oh, this is the perfect time as I'm working on fine-tuning and redoing the script to have this conversation with you. So it's perfect timing for me as well, as I'm exploring these ideas.
Yeah. Well, that's great. This actually goes back this all actually goes back to the 1950s, right?
All
So
right.
70 years ago. So Dr. Carl Rogers is one of the grandfathers of modern personal psychology. And he looked at all of his, he'd been working with thousands and thousands of clients by this time, and he was looking for the source of unhappiness. That was his, grand goal that he was looking for. And he identified this belief, and it's an unconscious belief, which is why it can be so confusing. But he identified this belief that our worth is conditional, that he said was the root cause of all suffering and unhappiness. That was his conclusion. So, we're coming, what's that, 70 odd years later now. And neuroscience is backing this up. Neuroscience is backing up this way that our brain works, that we have a belief system and we act from and interpret everything from this belief system, or the psychologists would call it a schema. So yeah, it really is fundamental. So it's not at all surprising that you're seeing it throughout all your coaching, because it's a root cause of stress.
Yes. And I think that's key to know as a parent to start with. Let's start like when you have time as a parent, let me teach my kids that their worth is unconditional. And it's easy with babies, right? Because babies, they're adorable. They don't have to do anything. But then at some point, we start saying, oh, you need to have good grades, and you need to clean your room. And we start making our affection conditional.
Yeah.
But what happens when someone is already an adult and they have, for certain experiences in their life, they were taught by society, the whole society teaches us our worth is conditional.
Yeah.
Like, let's not just blame the parents. Like, the whole society teaches you, oh, you need to be fit, and you need to be like this, and you need to have this education and to be worthy.
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
we've been having these messages, and let's say you've come up in an adult age and you have this belief, then what?
So one of the things that disappointed Dr. Rogers when he discovered this was he thought at the time that we couldn't change it. At that time, brain science
Oh,
told
wow.
us that our neurons, couldn't be regenerated, that our belief systems were fixed, and basically, sorry guys, there's nothing we can do about it. In the 1990s, Dr. Greg Bear came along and started doing some work around ways to change this belief in our conditional worth. And so I've taken that work and I've integrated it with all the neuroscience on how we can change beliefs, and it's pretty clear how we can change the beliefs in the brain. So it is absolutely something that we can address, and I see this then. I have 100% success rate with my clients, not because I'm any kind of brilliant coach or anything like this, but because the process that we are doing is following the way that the brain works. It's taking logical steps in terms of the way the brain works and just changing the belief, and changing the way that we see the world. And it's changing really the way we react to the world. So there's a part in the brain called the amygdala.
Yeah.
It's kind of behind the eyes and between the ears, and that the amygdala is looking for danger. So walking down the street, tiger jumps out. This is what the amygdala is looking for. It's a very primitive part of the system, very primal, and it's still very active. And the amygdala then throws the whole system, anytime it recognizes a danger, it throws the system into fight, flight, and freeze. So we get this physiological response to stress, and that has all sorts of things. It reduces our IQ. Actually, we can't think so well when we have this experience. We might lose our train of thought. We'll get the fight or flight, which means we'll get heart palpitations, we'll feel anxious, or we'll feel angry, and we'll lash out. We'll have a reaction, a response to the environment based on what the amygdala has decided is a threat. And so, although it's not reacting to threats, what the amygdala is reacting to is a threat to, or touching on the idea that that we're not good enough, basically. That our worth is conditional. So this is why we have such a strong reaction for it. And then when you get to the professional level, because it comes about our identity as a professional. Am I
Yeah.
good enough in my identity as a professional? This is how it shows up as imposter syndrome. So you're successful and you logically, you can think about it and you know that you're capable and you're competent, but internally you're feeling like you're not quite good enough. And there's it's called a cognitive dissonance when you're trying to hold two beliefs at the same time. And that's why imposter syndrome as it's by itself creates this feeling of confusion and overwhelm and isolation and self-criticism, anxiety, and yeah, it's that's really how it shows up for people. And the fact is that we can change it and we can do something about it following the processes that we now know work in the brain, and that we can change these beliefs means that, the solution is right there. It just needs it takes action, it needs work. So it's not a pill. We haven't got
Yeah.
a vaccine for imposter syndrome yet, or a pill, but we can change it, yes.
Okay. So if someone comes to work with you, and I know like what I found impressive was how short the engagements are, right? Like you say 8 to 12 weeks and you're done.
Mhm.
I,
Yeah.
I, I love seeing your LinkedIn. You say, do you want to get rid of your imposter syndrome this summer? I'm like, hell yeah. I know a lot of people who would benefit by that.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is opposite to the Carl Rogers. Like I was taught when I studied executive coaching, yes, the therapist or the coach gives unconditional positive regard for ages, and then maybe
Mhm.
that will heal because you take a little bit of a parental role of unconditional, but that's not what you're doing. This is a very
Mhm.
fast
Yeah.
let's get this sorted. So what
Yes.
can someone expect in this 8 weeks? How do you do the magic?
Well, so the reason that, as you just referred to, people were expected to kind of absorb this idea that they might actually be unconditionally worthy by inference from the attitude of their therapist, right? And it could take years and years and maybe, but what we're doing is actually doing something very specific. It's coming back to the neuroscience. So there's 3 steps. The first step is to calm the nervous system. Because if the nervous system is reacting, in crisis mode, expecting a tiger to leap from the corner of a room or something like that, then you can't change your brain. You can't change your belief because your brain is in emergency mode. So the um, you calm the nervous system. You calm the behaviors that are showing up that are the results of imposter syndrome, and you calm the triggers for imposter syndrome. So suddenly you've got a bit more, and we spend 1 week on each of those. It's very straightforward to do, and then your brain is sufficiently calm that we can start to do some changes in terms of the way that you perceive the environment around you. So then we dig into, so we've got a very, very good framework on why people do what they do. A lot of reasons we respond in automatic or reactive ways is because we're assuming things about the other person. Why did they say that? Oh, it must be because. And with imposter syndrome, because I'm not quite good enough. So you can see that it follows that. So we put another framework in place, and then we go through a process that changes that belief. And so the core belief, uh, that your worth is conditional, you're not quite good enough, has layers on it. So every time we experience something that confirms that or appears to confirm that, it's another layer on top of this belief. So it's like solidifying it in our brain. The brain's holding it to be true because there's all this evidence that it's looking out for and that it's got. So what we do is we unwind some of that evidence. And when we unwind the evidence, because of the way the brain works by association, then the evidence kind of loosens. If it's a knot, it loosens it, and then we can go and use the process to change it directly. So we've cleared that belief, and then the final part of it is to create positive success habits. So I know in a lot of coaching, there's things around mindset. There's actions around asking for help or saying no, things like that help people in their success, connecting with your authenticity. That we can now do and have stick because you've taken away the belief that would contradict it. So that's why often those things are hard to do in the first place, but now we can do it. So it's a very straightforward process, a very logical process. It's still a very personal process, so it can't be done in a group setting, because everybody's experience and everybody's brain's interpreting things in slightly different ways. They've had completely different experiences. So this is why it's a one-to-one process. And I would say that's probably the biggest limitation of it, that I can only work with one person at a time,
Yeah.
or as individuals, one-to-one. Yeah.
Yes. This is incredible. I think the one piece of this process that I've been most fascinated, like you calm the nervous system, calm the behaviors, the triggers, is actually the unpacking of the layers. And I think the reason I've sent so many of my clients to you, because of your therapeutic background, you're comfortable going there, right? Because it is going to the past a little bit and revisit it. How do you, tell me more? How do you do that piece? Because for me, that's the most challenging, right? Like,
Well, that was my original training back in,
yes,
22 years ago as a holistic therapist, is the attitude that you have. And 22 years ago, the first thing they said is you have to have gone there yourself, right? So
mhm,
I spent requirements for my program, 6 years doing body-centered psychotherapy, as in a recipient of it,
yes.
every 2 weeks for 6 years,
Oh,
and a lot of internal work, bringing up all of the old stuff. So, a traditional therapy environment, if you like, basically making sure there wasn't anything stuck, there wasn't anything unconscious that I was at least unaware of, right? So
mm,
what that means is that because you've gone through it yourself, you're not afraid of other people's pain. You're not afraid of other
mhm.
people's situation that might trigger yours, right? And so that's where people can back off if someone is getting too close to something that they haven't resolved in themselves. So it is a case of doing the work, very much so, and that was 22 years ago, and also doing the work that I teach as well, and that's what allows me to be there and supportive. And the other part of it is, as you say, that unconditional positive regard, to have, knowing that the person you're working with, this is them doing their best. And that's the thing about imposter syndrome. People feel about themselves like it's their personality, right? There's something wrong with them, or they feel like it's them personally, and it's really not. It's something that they've learned. It actually comes from when you're 18 months to 3 years old. It's something that you've
Oh, wow.
in the normal, yeah. So this is, when a child develops a sense of self. So before a child is 18 months old, they generally, they don't have any sense of themselves as being separate or different from their environment, their surroundings.
Mhm,
Their brain is starting to map out things, and there comes a point where the brain starts to realize, oh, I'm a different physical entity than this block. I'm a different physical entity than this person. And unless you're specifically taught at that point that your worth is different from your actions, then the brain just continues with that sense of mergedness that it's had as a baby. And so the reason that 99.9% of people have this sense of conditional worth is because they were never taught differently. And the reason they were never taught differently is their parents weren't taught differently. So it's not a blame the parents kind of thing. It's like you can't blame your parents if they didn't teach you a language they didn't know. So
mm.
it's they simply didn't know to teach you any different. And then, as you said right at the beginning, all of society reinforces this because everybody's believing it. And
All
the
right.
really good thing about it is we can change that. We can break through. We can break free from that sense that my worth depends on what I do, and then that is tremendous freedom then.
So that's so fascinating, because I always thought, okay, I was at Google for 8 years, and at Google they saw 70% of Googlers had imposter syndrome. They had done the research because it was such a high profile employer. And
Yeah.
people would get hired and they'd say, oh, I tricked them. I don't deserve to be here, right? Because they had 2 million CVs a year and you were
Mhm.
selected, right? So it was a breeding ground for imposter syndrome.
Yes. Yes.
But I always thought, for myself, just to self-disclose, I don't have imposter. Like I had the opposite. I usually thought, oh, I'm so good, and why don't people see it, right? I had the opposite, and that's the clients I most gravitate working with, right? I
Yeah.
was like, okay. But now what you're saying is not just 70%. At some point, all of us have had this conditional, and I saw it. Maybe it doesn't manifest exactly imposter syndrome, but this conditional worth is
Mhm.
something all of us,
Yes.
because when you were 18 months, or even your parents saying, don't do this, don't hold this, even the don't do this
Yes.
sends a signal, oh, something's wrong with me,
That's
right?
exactly it, yes. And the even just the shorthand of saying, bad boy, bad girl, right? So
Mm.
that's worth and actions, right? So that's if a parent can separate worth and actions, then, that wasn't a helpful thing to do, that wasn't a kind thing to do, that wasn't a something, right? Without labeling it as bad, because the child takes on that label as I am bad, because it has these merged. And so the more you could teach them. But of course, the easiest way is to not have that belief yourself, because otherwise your child's going to pick up on this, right? Children are very intuitive, they really know what's going on, and they can tell when you're not congruent. So if you're saying, oh yeah, if you're telling them something and then clearly demonstrating differently, then they'll pick up on that, and that's just confusing to them. So it's a very tricky thing to do.
Okay. And in that process, my question was, I've calmed the nervous system and all of it, and it's time to unpack the layers.
Yes.
From my experience, this can be painful at the time, right? Because all pain that you have repressed and suppressed
Mhm.
is coming up, but it's the pain that ends all pain, right? Because if you release it, then you're free.
Yes.
Is that your experience too? That when these things come up, it can be a little bit emotional?
It can. So there is a process that psychotherapists use, and I've got to say this isn't therapy. So imposter syndrome is normal functioning according to therapists. It's not a mental
Yeah,
illness.
that's
Um,
my distinction.
but
Yes.
but one of the processes I use is one from psychotherapy, which is called gradual exposure. So what we have is a process that releases the emotional charge, the emotional memory, right, of these layers, of these past
Mm.
experiences, and we start small, right? We start with the smallest things, and then people learn the process on the small things, and because they're small, they're easy to deal with. That also gives them an experience that this works, and then we just step up gradually to the deeper and deeper things, and because again, memory is associative, they associate together in our brains. You release one and it kind of, softens the rest. So it becomes easier and easier to do the more you do it. So it's simply a case of doing that process. And it doesn't, it's surprising, it doesn't take that many iterations of this process. So, I think in the course of the program, we do about 30 of them, and that's enough to break through. And of course, taking that step by step by step process.
Love
And
it.
the other part of it is being very much, and this is also why it has to be one to one. Is I'm there with them, right?
Yes.
I'm there with the client, and if it gets at all like they feel it's too much, if they're feeling going too fast, we just slow down. Right? We take a step back, and we move forward. So the gradual exposure process is get calm, stretch a little bit, get calm, stretch a little bit, and we follow that process through the belief change process, so it doesn't become overwhelming.
Love it. So tell me a little bit, what's life after? Like how does it look? You've seen all those clients, you have 100% success rate.
Mm,
How does it feel, and how is it to be free from all this baggage and all these triggers and all this insecurity, rather than trying to manipulate the environment not to poke those triggers? You
that's it.
just feel great inside, and this pours out on the outside, right? Tell me a
That's
little
it.
bit more. What have
Yes.
you seen?
So it feels effortless, right? It feels like effortless confidence. You don't have to try and talk yourself into feeling comfortable. You just are. So an exam, and so you feel lighter. You feel that freedom. You feel um, more able to be more adventurous and experiment and try things because you're not so worried that you're going to get found out. You're gonna get any kickback like that. So that's kind of look. So one example. Somebody, say you're in a meeting and someone in the meeting starts getting angry, right? So they're having this, emotional response to something. They're getting angry. They might be saying something directly to you. They might be saying something to someone else. Now, our nervous system, right, before doing this work, would automatically get triggered into the fight, flight, and freeze state. We might argue back. We might shrink back. We might leave. We might just be frozen and not be able to do anything. So once you've got rid of that hook, if you like, that your worth is conditional, then you can see someone else's anger and you can say, okay, they're having this emotional response. Clearly there's something going on for them. So you're not taking it personally. It's
Yeah, you
not.
say, how adorable. Like you see a child with a tantrum. Like I think at some point you're just seeing people's tantrums as you would see children's. How adorable. Look how angry you got. Like that's what we're aiming for, like to be able to be so
Yeah.
disengaged and find it actually cute because this person is having a meltdown like a little child and actually deserves compassion.
Yes, exactly. And the compassion's the part of it because, we're a social species, right? So our nervous systems talk to one another. So if somebody gets afraid, and that's what that anger is a fear, is a fear response. If someone gets afraid, then it's like somebody in a room gasps and everyone looks to see what it is, right? So that sense can spread. If you don't get triggered by that, because it's not about you and you can understand it's about them and you have the compassion, okay, what can I do to help them? Poor thing, that must be very stressful for them. Then what happens is that you are remaining calm and so your nervous system, by everything it's communicating in your face, your body language, is saying, it's okay, we're safe, there's no danger here.
Yeah.
And that's how calm also spreads. So the fear can ripple through a group and the calm can also ripple through a group. So this is where you stay. And it's not that you're forcing yourself to stay calm. It's not like you're doing breathing techniques and trying to, hold on to this sense of calm. It's automatically there. So there was a study done in 2012 by the Asada Business School, and they found that the most transformational leaders from their MBA students were the ones that could regulate their own nervous system, which is what we're talking about, and those of other people. And that's that communication, my nervous system to yours. So when somebody's, say, angry in a meeting and you're calm and you're not threatened by it, you can respond in a calm way, a way that helps them. It actually calms them down as well because you're telling their nervous system, hey, there's no danger. So those are the kind of things that the typical stories that come out. And it ripples out and improves relationships because you go straight to that feeling of compassion for people, understanding them, why they're doing what they're doing, and understanding that it's not about you.
Yeah. And your relationship with significant other, that's what I've seen, like the partnerly, because you might get triggered or judged. Like this is one of the most important relationships, and I see imposter syndrome affecting those relationships if you feel
Yes.
triggered by your partner. And the truth is, we invest so much on ourselves and our success and our education, and unless you clean up the inner stuff, you don't enjoy it. I feel we work so hard and we get the promotion and the business and the thing
Yeah.
and and then you realize, oh, I'm not feeling as thought I would be feeling. That wasn't enough because we never looked inside to clean up a little bit of what's happening and actually access the inner joy and worthiness and well-being that it's there. It's just we've blocked it with like these beliefs you mentioned, right?
That's it. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yes, yes. And so, the ripple effect is huge because it affects, anyone who reports to you, you're reacting in a different way now. So it's your work relationships, your colleagues, your boss, your clients, and it affects your home relationships with your family, right? Because a lot of people have old tensions from the family, and you once you know how to do the process, this process to let go of those layers, then you can just do it any time, and it ripples out. So it repairs relationships in families that have been broken. I've seen it heal even people going through a divorce, turn it from this nasty, bitter divorce to an amicable one. Those kind of things.
Nice.
Mm.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the synergies of our work, because we have put together an offer. Because what I realized, a lot of people will come to Vision Path to work on their vision, but they needed to work on the imposter syndrome. So we'll send them to you, and
Yeah.
then I think even the other way around. You resolve the imposter syndrome, and you're ready to take some risks, and you're like, okay, I'm ready, baby. What's next? And then you
Yeah.
want to work on the vision. So I thought, why don't we partner together? So we put together. It's just a combination of our programs, the Vision Path program from the Leader Path, and Inner Success, Tara's program,
Yeah.
because we think we work great together.
It it it
So
it
yes,
it really does. I mean, the people that I work with are they're senior level executives, right? So everyone else thinks they should have their life sorted by now. They don't need any help, but actually, imposter syndrome is this big barrier for them, and they get past it, and they don't just sit there going, "Oh, this is comfortable." They start getting excited about where next, what next adventure, right? Challenges then become, an exciting adventure and a stretch for them rather than being something to be concerned about. And they do, and because they're, such capable and competent people, they have this feeling, okay, what can I contribute next? What can I try next? Where might I go? And because they're not being held back by this imposter syndrome, there's this natural desire to expand, right?
yeah,
Natural desire to grow. And I think that's where your leader path works really well for them, getting
yes,
their vision, and now they're able to implement in a way that they weren't before because they were being held back. So even though they're successful, right? And this is part of the frustration of it, they know there's more they could do and achieve for their own enjoyment, their own satisfaction, for their own growth.
exactly. Our work is so aligned because
Yes.
that's how I teach vision. It's not let me achieve this to be happy. It's like, let me be happy, and there's such an overflow of creativity and love and joy, and my work becomes the expression of this inner well-being that I love. We're so aligned on this.
Yeah.
So if any of you are interested, the next Vision Path, it is a group program. You can work with Tara. I know it's a one-to-one program. Vision Path, it is a group program. It starts the next cohort 31st of October. And it's a 6-week program to define your personal and business vision. So if any of you are interested for this combination, which I think it's amazing. Either we are on LinkedIn, so you either reach out to Tara or me on LinkedIn. I'm not going to send you any links. We have some questions, Tara. Are you happy to take some questions? I know we're
Yes,
online.
absolutely. Yes.
Eloise is asking 2 questions. How many sessions are typically required? You mentioned 30. No, you don't require 30 sessions. Let me.
No. So my program is typically 8 to 12 weeks, but we do the length on it depends on the person I'm working with. So if
Yeah.
somebody needs to take some of the steps a bit slower, we take them a bit slower. So the typical is between 8 to 12 weeks. It takes people 3 to 4 hours a week, so it is work. So there's principles and so there's some videos to watch with all the principles and outlining them. Then there's exercises to do, which take 1 to 2 hours, and then there's a one-to-one session every week. And so it's working together to deepen it, to solidify it, and to make sure that you got the results for that week. If not, we'll just repeat the week. So yeah, 3 to 4 hours a week, 8 to 12 weeks, that's pretty typical.
Fantastic. Eloise also asked
if you work with children, and I know you don't, I know your niche is very specific, but do you have any resources by any chance?
So actually, the coaching group that I worked with originally around conditional worth, they have a very clear perspective on this. Is that the adults have to do the work for themselves, because if you try and put something on or teach a child to do something without the adult having that same belief, it's not going to be very effective. So, like in the airplane, it's first put the oxygen mask on yourself,
Yeah.
and then you can do it. So once you have done this program for yourself, then you will be easily able to work with your children and instill this sense of unconditional worth in them. And also, just the process itself does need somebody to be an adult, and have, so they'd need to be over the age of 23, which is when your brain stops changing and growing.
Fantastic. Any other questions from our live viewers? All right. So Tara, what would you like to leave us with? This was such a beautiful discussion.
Yes, that was great. So if you have, or you think you have, imposter syndrome, there's three big things to know. The firstly is that it's not you, right? It's not a personal flaw. You're not alone. As Caterina mentioned, over 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career. So, it's just that people don't talk about it. And the third thing is that you can do something about it. You can get rid of it. You don't have to suffer with it.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you for the work you do. It's so important. And I know, like, as a coach, working one-to-one, going deep with the people, but then you see the results, you see them liberated for life and being able to access this inner success. Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for sharing so generously with us today. I'm so excited to have partnered with you on this and help our clients together. And feel free to reach out to Tara or myself. Thank you, Tara. It was a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks a lot.